What if the thing you have been fighting your entire life, the anger, the frustration, the feeling that the world keeps finding exactly how to get to you, what if none of it was ever coming from outside? What if every single person who ever made you furious was only ever showing you something that was already living inside you, waiting? That idea either just opened a door in your mind or it just made you want to argue with me. Either way, you need to hear what comes next. There is a moment, and I want you to think about this carefully. There is a moment in your life, and it has already happened to you, where someone said something or did something, and you felt it. You felt it like a hand reaching inside your chest and squeezing. Your jaw tightened. Your thoughts started racing. Something inside you rose up like fire, hot and uncontrolled. And before you even had the chance to think, you were already angry, already disturbed, already reacting, already at the mercy of something that was never yours to begin with. And here is the question I want to place in front of you today. Not as a philosopher, not as someone standing above you on a mountain telling you how to live, but as someone who has walked the same road, who has fallen in the same mud, who has felt the same fire. The question is this: what if that moment never had to happen again? What if I told you that the anger you feel, the irritation, the frustration, the sense that the world keeps pushing you, keeps poking you, keeps finding exactly the right way to get under your skin? What if I told you that none of that is actually coming from the outside? What if the source of all of it, every single bit of it, has always been inside you? Now, before you close your mind to that idea, before you say to yourself, no, you don't understand what they did to me, you don't know what I've been through, you don't know the people I have to deal with, I want you to stay with me, because I'm not here to dismiss your pain. I'm not here to tell you that what happened to you didn't matter. What I am here to tell you is something far more powerful than any validation I could offer you. I am here to hand you the key, the actual key, the one that unlocks the door you have been banging your fists against your entire life. But first, you need to understand something about water. When you hold a cup of clear water in your hand, perfectly still, you can see all the way to the bottom. You can see through it. It reflects the light. It is pure, clean, undisturbed. Now take that same cup of water and shake it. Shake it hard. What happens? The water becomes cloudy. You can no longer see through it. The clarity is gone. And the question is, did the shaking create something new inside the water? Did it put something into the water that wasn't there before? No. The shaking only disturbed what was already sitting at the bottom. The sediment was always there. The shaking only revealed it. This is what anger is. This is what frustration is. This is what happens every time someone or something manages to disturb you. They did not create your anger. They did not install your irritation. They simply shook the cup. And everything that rose to the surface, every hot, burning, chaotic emotion that came flooding up, was already sitting inside you, waiting, patient, settled at the bottom of who you are. The person who angered you was just the hand that shook the cup. Now here is where most people stop. They hear this and they nod and they think, yes, I understand. The anger is mine. I take responsibility. And then the very next day, someone cuts them off in traffic, or a colleague ignores their message, or a family member says the wrong thing at the wrong moment, and the cup gets shaken again, and everything floods up again, and they forget everything they just agreed with. Because understanding an idea and actually being free from it are two completely different things. And most people confuse the map for the territory. They think that knowing the theory means they have made the journey. The journey is far longer than any theory. And it begins in a place that most people spend their entire lives running away from. It begins with silence, not the silence of a quiet room, not the silence of turning off your phone. The silence I am speaking about is the silence inside, the kind that most people find deeply, profoundly uncomfortable. Because when the outside world goes quiet, when the distractions fall away, when the music stops and the screen goes dark, and there is nothing left to scroll through, nothing left to consume, that is when you are left alone with what is actually inside you. And for most people, what is inside is not peaceful. What is inside is a storm, a constant, churning, never-ending storm of thoughts, judgments, memories, fears, comparisons, resentments, desires, a noise that never stops, a voice that never shuts up, a mind that never rests. And this is the root. This is the origin of every moment of anger you have ever felt. Not the person who insulted you, not the situation that didn't go the way you planned, not the world failing to meet your expectations. The root is the unexamined interior, the unvisited landscape of your own mind. The sediment that has been building up layer by layer, year by year, experience by experience, wound by wound, and no one ever taught you to look at it. No one ever showed you how to go inside and examine what is actually there. So instead, you learn to manage, you learn to suppress, you learn to project, you learn to blame, because that is what the world teaches. As long as you keep believing in that story, you will remain a prisoner. A very sophisticated, very educated, very modern prisoner, but a prisoner nonetheless. Locked inside a cell whose door has no lock from the outside. A cell that can only be opened from within. So let me tell you what the training actually looks like. Not the poetic version. Not the version that sounds beautiful on a screen. The actual, daily, unglamorous, difficult, sometimes boring, sometimes painful practice of becoming someone who cannot be shaken. It starts with the body. Always the body first. Because before you ever have a thought about what just happened, before you construct a story about who was right and who was wrong, before the narrative even begins to form, the body has already responded. The chest tightens, the shoulders rise, the breath becomes shallow, the jaw clenches, the stomach knots. The body knows before the mind does. And if you are not paying attention to your body, if you are not intimately familiar with its landscape, you will miss the moment. You will miss the only moment where genuine choice is possible. That moment between stimulus and response is not a second long. It is not half a second. It is a fraction of a moment. It is the thinnest sliver of space, and inside that sliver is everything. Inside that sliver is your freedom. But you cannot access it if you are not present. And you cannot be present if you do not know what your body feels like when it is calm. Because you cannot recognize the deviation if you have never established the baseline. This is why every serious tradition of inner development begins with the breath. Not because breathing is magical, not because there is something mystical about air entering and leaving your lungs, but because the breath is the one bridge that connects the voluntary and the involuntary. It is the one system of the body that operates automatically, but can also be consciously controlled. And by learning to control it, by learning to lengthen it, deepen it, slow it, you gain access to the entire cascade of physiological responses that create the experience of being overwhelmed, of being out of control, of being at the mercy of your emotions. When you breathe slowly and deeply, it is biologically impossible for your stress response to maintain its peak intensity. The two systems are incompatible. The activation of the rest and digest response through deep, slow breathing, directly inhibits the fight or flight cascade. This is not philosophy. This is physiology. And when you understand this, not as a concept, but in your body, through practice, through repetition, through the actual experience of bringing yourself back from the edge again and again, you begin to realize that you have a tool, a real tool, one that is available to you every moment of every day, requires no equipment, costs nothing, and cannot be taken from you. But the breath alone is not enough. The breath is the entry point. What you find when you go through that entry point is the real work. What you find is the pattern. Every person who gets angry repeatedly at the same kinds of things. And notice that it is always the same kinds of things, always the same triggers, always the same types of people who manage to find their way under your skin. Every such person is living out a pattern they have never examined, a groove that was carved into them, usually very early, usually by something they did not choose and could not control. And that has been running quietly in the background of their life ever since, like a program installed on a computer that no one knows is there, consuming resources, affecting performance, distorting output. These patterns do not announce themselves. They do not send you a calendar invitation. They operate in the shadows of your automatic responses. They live in the gap between what you think you believe and how you actually behave. And they will keep running, keep triggering, keep disturbing, keep shaking the cup until the day you turn toward them with full awareness and look at them directly. Most people never do this. Most people find it much more comfortable to adjust the external world, to avoid certain situations, to stay away from certain people, to carefully manage the conditions of their life so that the triggers are minimized. And this works for a while. It works right up until the moment the world stops cooperating, which is every single day, because the world was never designed to cooperate with your avoidance strategies. The world is indifferent to your comfort. The world will send you exactly the type of person, exactly the type of situation, exactly the type of challenge that you have been trying to avoid. Not as punishment, but simply because that is the nature of a world that contains billions of people, all operating from their own unexamined patterns. And so the only actual solution, the only thing that actually works, is to go inside, to sit with the discomfort, to look at the pattern directly, to ask, where does this come from? Not in a therapeutic, let me excavate my childhood way necessarily, though that has its place, but in a clear, honest, present moment way. When I feel this particular quality of anger, this particular flavor of irritation, what is the story I am telling? What is the expectation that has been violated? What is the belief that has been challenged? What is the version of reality I was holding that just got contradicted by what happened? Because anger is always, without exception, a collision between your expectations and reality. Always. It is never about the event itself. It is always about the gap between what you thought should happen and what actually happened. And the size of your anger is always proportional to the size of that gap, to how rigidly you are holding on to your version of how things should be. This is why the teaching of impermanence is not just a spiritual idea. It is not a consolation for people who are grieving. It is a practical instruction for how to live without constant suffering. Because if you truly, not intellectually, but in your bones, in your gut, truly understood that nothing is fixed, that everything is in motion, that the only constant is change, that the person standing in front of you is not the same person they were 5 years ago, 5 months ago, 5 minutes ago, then every rigid expectation you hold becomes obviously absurd. Every demand that the world stay still while you have decided how it should look becomes clearly, transparently, a form of suffering you are choosing to inflict on yourself. I am not saying that you should have no standards. I am not saying that you should accept everything that comes to you with a blank, passive smile. Do not confuse equanimity with indifference. Do not confuse peace with weakness. The person I am describing, the one who cannot be angered, who cannot be disturbed, who moves through the world like water around stones, this person is not passive. This person is not a pushover. This person is not someone who lets the world do whatever it wants and smiles through the pain. This person is in fact the most powerful person in any room they walk into, because their power does not depend on the cooperation of anyone or anything outside themselves. Their peace is not conditional. Their stability is not borrowed from the behavior of others. And that is a completely different kind of power than the kind most people spend their lives chasing. Most people pursue power by trying to control the external world. More money, more status, more influence, more control over circumstances and people and outcomes. The constant, exhausting, never satisfied pursuit of arranging the outside world in a way that makes the inside feel okay. But the inside never feels okay for long, because the outside keeps changing, and the control is always partial, always temporary, always one unexpected event away from collapsing. The power I am describing is the power that comes from having arranged the inside, from having done the work of understanding yourself so thoroughly, so honestly, so completely, that the outside world simply does not have the same buttons to push anymore. Not because you have suppressed anything, not because you have built a wall, but because the sediment has been cleared, because the work has been done, because the cup is clean and there is nothing left at the bottom to be stirred up. Now let me talk about the people, because this is where almost everyone gets stuck. The theory of inner work sounds beautiful in isolation, but then there are the people, your family, your colleagues, your friends, the stranger on the street, the person online, the one who seems to exist for the sole purpose of saying exactly the wrong thing in exactly the right way to produce exactly the most intense version of your worst reaction. Let's talk about them. Here is something I want you to consider. Every person who has ever angered you was, in that moment, operating from the fullest extent of their own awareness. This does not mean their behavior was acceptable. This does not mean you should have no response to it. But it means this: they could not have done otherwise. Not because they have no free will, but because the choices available to any person are always limited by the level of clarity they have access to in that moment. A person who is operating from deep unconsciousness, from unexamined wounds, from decades of unprocessed pain, that person is not making choices the way you imagine they are making choices. They are being carried by their patterns, just as you have been carried by yours. And when you understand this, really understand it, something shifts, not into pity necessarily, not into soft, weepy compassion that excuses everything, but into a kind of clarity that changes your relationship to their behavior. You stop taking it personally, and this is the key phrase, the pivot point around which everything turns. Stop taking it personally. Nothing anyone does is about you, even when it appears to be about you. Even when they use your name, even when the words are aimed directly at you. What they are doing is always, always, always a reflection of their own interior. Their anger, their criticism, their contempt, their cruelty, it is a projection. It is a transmission from their world onto the screen of your presence. And you have a choice about whether to accept that transmission, whether to let it land, whether to take it in and let it become something inside you. You have been trained by years of conditioning to accept these transmissions automatically, to let them in without screening them, to feel the weight of someone else's pain as though it were a fact about you, as though their anger meant something true about your worth, as though their criticism revealed something real about your value. But it does not. It never did. And the day you truly understand this, not just hear it, not just agree with it, but feel it in the deepest part of your being, that is the day the world loses its power to disturb you. But I want to be careful here, because I can feel the objection forming, because some of what people say about you does contain truth. Sometimes the criticism is accurate. Sometimes the anger is justified. Sometimes the person pointing the finger is pointing at something real. And I am not asking you to dismiss all of it. I am not telling you to live in a hermetically sealed bubble of self-satisfactions where no external input can reach you. What I am telling you is to develop the discernment to know the difference, to be able to receive information about yourself without being destabilized by it, to be able to look at a criticism and say, is there something true here that I need to see, without the looking itself being a painful, ego-threatening, defensive, reactive process, without the question being loaded with shame or pride. Just clear, honest examination. Is there something here I need to learn? If yes, learn it. If no, release it. Neither process needs to involve suffering. Neither requires you to be destroyed in order to grow. And this brings me to something that I think is one of the most misunderstood ideas in all of personal development. The idea that growth requires pain, that you need to be broken open in order to become more. That suffering is the price of wisdom. And while it is absolutely true that difficulty and challenge are often the conditions under which the deepest growth occurs, it is not true that the suffering itself is what creates the growth. The suffering is not the teacher. The awareness that you bring to the suffering is the teacher. The suffering without awareness just produces more suffering, just produces scar tissue, just produces more armor, more walls, more rigid patterns. The same experience met with awareness becomes transformation. Met without it becomes trauma. This is why two people can go through identical circumstances and come out of them as completely different human beings. One becomes more open, more compassionate, more clear, more grounded. The other becomes more closed, more bitter, more defended, more reactive. The experience was the same. The difference was entirely in the quality of attention brought to it, in the willingness to feel it fully, to examine it honestly, to integrate it consciously, versus the impulse to push it away, suppress it, bury it, deny it, project it, escape it. So I want to speak now directly to the person who is watching this and thinking, I have been through real things. I have been through things that most people cannot imagine. And you are standing there telling me not to be angry? You are standing there telling me to look inside? You have no idea what I have carried. And I want to say to that person, I hear you. And I am not asking you to minimize what happened to you. I am not asking you to pretend it was easy, or that it didn't matter, or that you should have simply risen above it without effort. What I am asking, what I'm inviting you to consider, is whether the anger you are still carrying is protecting you or imprisoning you. Because there is a version of anger that is completely valid and necessary. The anger that arises when something genuinely wrong happens. The anger that gives you the energy to draw a boundary, to say no, to move away from something harmful. That anger is not the problem. That anger is information. That anger is a healthy signal from your system that something is not right. But there is another version of anger. The anger that has been living inside you for months or years. The anger that has become a permanent tenant in the house of your personality. The anger that you have started to identify with. That you have made part of who you are. That you use to tell the story of your life. That anger is no longer protecting you. That anger has become the cage. Because every moment you spend in that anger is a moment you are giving your present life to a past event. You are taking energy, attention, vitality, the irreplaceable currency of your actual living days, and you are handing it over to something that is no longer happening. You are keeping the wound open with your own hand. And the only person paying the price for that is you. The person who wronged you, in most cases, is not sitting somewhere thinking about you, is not staying up at night, troubled by what they did, is not spending their energy on this the way you are spending yours. They have moved on. The event is over. Sometimes the anger is the last connection to something. Sometimes the anger is a way of maintaining proximity to someone or something you lost. Sometimes the anger is a way of saying, what happened to me mattered. What was done to me was real. And I am afraid that if I stop being angry, it means it didn't matter. It means I am saying it was okay. And I want you to hear this very clearly. Letting go of the anger does not mean the event didn't matter. It does not mean you are saying it was okay. It does not mean you are excusing what happened or the person who did it. Forgiveness, and I am using that word carefully because I know it carries enormous weight for many people. Forgiveness is not a statement about what they deserve. Forgiveness is a decision you make about what you deserve. It is the choice to stop carrying something that is too heavy, that is no longer serving you, that is costing you your present moment, your health, your joy, your capacity to be fully alive right now. Because that is the real cost of unresolved anger. Not just the obvious things, the elevated stress, the physical tension, the relationships it damages, the opportunities it closes. The deepest cost is presence. The deepest cost is your ability to be fully here, fully in this moment, fully alive to what is actually happening right now, rather than replaying what happened then. Every moment of anger about the past is a moment of absence from the present. And the present moment is the only place where your life is actually happening. Not in the memory of yesterday, not in the anxiety about tomorrow, right here, right now. And anger, chronic, unexamined, habitual anger, steals this from you more completely than anything else I know. So what do you do? Practically, concretely. Not on the level of philosophy, but on the level of Monday morning when the email arrives and the words land and the chest tightens and the fire starts to rise. What do you actually do? You pause. That is the first thing before anything else.